effort towards the hereafter does not stop except because it is deficient. Meaning that if a person has a high determination, then this person would do more for his hereafter. And the only reason they are not working more for their hereafter is because they have a lack of effort. So as the author said, otherwise, when the effort is adequate, it will not accept the inferior. If you have a strong determination to work for the hereafter, you won't be satisfied with doing the bare minimum. But if you are someone who is lazy and the like, then you won't work more and therefore you will do less for your hereafter. He said, I came to know through evidence that effort is born with man. And some efforts fall short sometimes, but if they are urged, they move. Meaning that it's down to you how much effort you put in, for this effort can increase or decrease. You can either urge yourself to do more or be satisfied with being lazy, and this then will be down to you, and subsequent accountability will fall on that. That if it is the case that you allow yourself to be lazy, then you will miss out on many beneficial things, acts of worship you could have done, reward you could have gained, all because you're not willing to put the effort in. And where the effort is found, then you find these Muslims and these individuals with high ranks and statuses because of what they did for their hereafter. Which leaves us then with this last slide of section 2, where the author, rahimahullah, said, وَمَا رَأَيْتَ فِي نَفْسِكَ عَجْزًا فَسَلِ الْمُنْعِمَ أَوْ كَسَلًا فَالْجَأْ إِلَى الْمُوَفِّقِ فَلَنْ تَنَالَ خَيْرًا إِلَّا بِطَاعَتِهِ وَلَا يَفُوتُكَ خَيْرٌ إِلَّا بِمَعْصِيَتِهِ فمن الذي أقبل عليه فلم يرى كل مراد ومن الذي أعرض عنه فمضى بفائدة أو حظي بغرض من أغراضه أو ما سمعت قول الشاعر والله ما جئتكم زائرا إلا وجدت الأرض تطوى لي ولا ثنيت العزم عن بابكم إلا تعثرت بأذيالي. What's the author saying here? The author starts by saying, whenever you see yourself deficient, meaning lacking the determination to work for the hereafter, ask the one who bestows, referring to Allah. Ask Al-Mun'im. He is the one who bestows people with all of what they have. Or whenever you see yourself lazy, you find within yourself kasal, laziness, turn to the muwaffiq, meaning the one who gives success. So what is the author starting by saying here then? He's talking about if a person was lazy. What's meant by lazy here? Religiously speaking, laziness refers to a weak determination to do good deeds. That's what's meant by the author's choice of wording of ajiz and kasal, meaning a weak determination to do good deeds. And so if a person finds that within themselves, that they can't push themselves to get up for Fajr, they can't push themselves to stay up for Isha, they can't find it within themselves to recite Surah Mulk before they sleep, they can't find themselves to get up and do something for their hereafter. Why? Because of their laziness. What's the solution to that? To ask the one who bestows, meaning requests from Allah, O person, that He distances you from laziness, meaning request that from Allah, supplicate that from Allah. And this is something that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam sought refuge in Allah from. Why? Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was lazy? No. This was so that he would teach us to seek refuge in Allah from it. As for himself, he was the furthest man ever from laziness. How could it be said about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he was lazy? Yet he was the one who would be seen getting up in the middle of the night to worship Allah Ta'ala. He was the one that would be seen standing for long periods in prayer, to the extent his feet would start to swell, and he would be asked, O Messenger of Allah, you have no sin to your name. You will be the first to enter paradise. Why all of this effort? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Afala akunu abdan shakura." Would I not be thankful to Allah for those endowments? So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam himself was not lazy. Why then seek refuge in Allah from laziness? To teach his ummah that laziness is not a good trait to have. It's not a praiseworthy attribute. And if a person finds it within themselves, let them ask Allah to remove it from them. Because with laziness, there are a lot of bad consequences. Sometimes a person might be lazy, whereby they miss out on extra things. They don't, as we said, recite Quran at night. They don't do extra dhikr. They don't perform extra prayers. That's them just missing out on something, which still is not something good, all because of them being lazy. But then there might be some laziness that allows a person to commit sins. They're so lazy, they don't even perform their obligations. So lazy that they might miss obligatory prayers without an excuse, just because they don't find within themselves the determination to get up and make wudu, to stand and pray. This is then a laziness that has severe consequences. Hence, in all circumstances, a person should not allow themselves to be lazy, and if they find laziness in themselves, let them seek to remove it from themselves, either by doing something active, or at the least then asking Allah to remove it from you, asking Allah to distance you from laziness. And so sometimes the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would ask Allah for something to teach his nation to ask for that thing. For example, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inni astaghfirullah ta'ala mi'ata marra kulla yawm," which means that he said, I perform istighfar, which means to say astaghfirullah 100 times a day. Why? Because the Prophet was committing 100 sins a day? No, to teach his ummah to get into the habit of asking Allah for forgiveness and to say this honorable statement, astaghfirullah. So we see how beneficial it is to imitate the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the wisdom in all that he did. And he said also, that is the author, rahimahullah, turn to the one who gives success. Meaning who? Allah. Turn to him. Supplicate to him. For he is the one who creates within you the ability to do acts of worship. This is the meaning of tawfiq. So when you ask Allah Ta'ala to be granted tawfiq, it means you're asking Allah to create within you the ability to obey him. When you ask somebody else to make dua for you to be granted tawfiq, or vice versa, you make dua for them, you're asking Allah to create within them the ability to perform the good deeds. This is the meaning of tawfiq. So that's what a person can do in terms of turning to Allah and supplicating. And in terms of something more practical, let's say, and something direct that one themselves might do, is what our Shaykh rahimahullah once advised when asked, what can one do to be away from laziness? He said to think about death a lot. If you regularly remind yourselves that you're going to die and what you do in this life is all what you're going to take with you to your grave. And either you would have loneliness in your grave or company. And the only company that you would have would be in the form of your good deeds. So why be lazy now and miss out on doing them and finding yourself lonely in your grave? That should ideally spur you and push you on then to get out of that laziness, to work for the life that you will have in your grave and in the hereafter. And he went on to say, among what helps a person to think about death more is to visit the people who are dead, meaning the cemeteries and the graveyards. And so to spend time there and to reflect, that's going to be me soon. I'll be one of them. Is it not the case that among the opening supplication one makes when entering the grave is to say to the inhabitants of the grave, أنتم السابقون ونحن إن شاء الله بكم للاحقون. You have preceded us to the graves, and we will be following you shortly, insha'Allah. So soon as you step foot into the grave, you'll be reminding yourself, that's going to be you soon in that grave. What have you prepared so far? What have you done so far? Those in the cemeteries are gone. Can't do anything else. Whatever efforts they put in, that's all they have now in their graves. It's not ended for you yet. The opportunity is still available. You can still do something for your hereafter while you are alive. So don't be lazy. Don't fall short. Don't then allow the time to pass while you're alive and not get anything in return for it. And then you find yourself in your grave on the day of judgment, lacking for company. All because of what? Not because you didn't have time or you had other responsibilities or the like. You were lazy. And what a bad state to be in, that you could have done more and you didn't because you allowed laziness to overcome you. This should not be the case of an individual, that they allow this laziness, if you like, to beat them, because this is what the devil wants. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ sought refuge with Allah from this, because it's something that is encouraged by the devil. And so he said, turn to the one who gives success. He continued, you will not obtain good except by obeying him. So having the determination to do good deeds or to be lazy in doing them, all of that occurs by the will of Allah. Nothing happens in this world except by the will of Allah, the Exalted. Hence, turn to him, for he is the one who enables you to do the acts of worship if he so eternally willed. And you will not then do any good deed except by his tawfiq, and you will not be able to refrain from any sin except by his protection. This is the meaning of لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. And so, as the author advised then, turn to Allah Ta'ala in order to obey him and to remove any laziness from yourself. So it is correct then to say the statement, turn to Allah, for he is the one who creates within you the ability to do acts of obedience. However, we don't say, for example, as some people say, make your connection with God or connect to God or with God, for example. They use this statement at times. This is not a good thing to say or an accurate statement to say, especially since Allah is not attributed with connection or disconnection. Rather, we say turn to the obedience of Allah and turn to supplicate to Allah rather than connect or disconnect from God. That is a more befitting and appropriate statement to say. And so he said, you will not miss good except by disobeying him. Especially if a person doesn't realize that committing sins have consequences. The Prophet ﷺ once said in a hadith that a person might be prevented from some sustenance because of his disobedience to Allah. And the scholars even mention that a person might even forget some of the religious knowledge that he learned because of sins that he committed. Hence, don't think, I'll commit a sin and then repent and I'll be okay. I'll commit a sin, then repent. Sometimes these sins have consequences that you don't realize. Hence, you will not get goodness if you disobey Allah. He continued on and said, who has ever obeyed him and still not seen every sort matter? Who has ever turned away from him and still has obtained any of his goals? In other words, if you turn to Allah Ta'ala, you will find your hopes, or you will not find your hopes and aspirations wasted. And this comes from what the scholars have mentioned, that if you turn to Allah and supplicate to Allah Ta'ala, you will not leave empty-handed. Either you will get what you sought in your supplication, so you attained something, or because you made dua to Allah Ta'ala, a certain difficulty or hardship that was about to come your way did not because of this supplication. And if this or that did not happen, at the very least, you got a reward for making dua to Allah. So in all of that, you got something. You didn't fail in the hereafter as a result. Some people, in a delusional way, say, I've been making dua to Allah for a while and I don't have anything in return. But I've been asking God for ages and nothing's happened yet, as if to say there's been no benefit. And this is not something that is accurate and not something good. If you had sincerely supplicated to Allah, it might even be that the wisdom is not for you to get what you're asking for right now. So for argument's sake, you might be making dua to Allah to get married. Oh Allah, allow me to get married. Oh Allah, facilitate for me a good spouse, etc. And you've been looking and asking and waiting for a while, and you've not got one yet. So you lose a bit of hope and you start to feel down. And why has Allah not answered my dua yet? And why have I not found a spouse yet, etc. When what you're asking for might not be best for you right now. I mean, there might be something which, if you were to get married right now, would not result in something beneficial for you, or might make you miss out on something good if you got married now. That how many people do we see that after they get married, stop attending religious classes or don't attend them with the same energy? Why? They're busy now with the spouse. There's more rights that are involved and more responsibilities and burdens and the like that come with being married. So you might have thought, I want to get married, and you ask for that when what would be better for you is not to get married right now and allow yourself to exert the energy that you have to attend classes. And then you might even be in a better place a year down the line, or 6 months or 2 years down the line, where you get married then, and now you've got more knowledge to carry with you into that marriage. You might not have appreciated or reflected on the wisdom at that time, but there might be wisdom in that. But all of that happened because you turned to Allah. You asked Allah, you put your trust in Allah, and you got this merit for you in terms of the reward for asking. And you might get a spouse, for example, at a more befitting and appropriate time for you, which you might not realize at the time. He said in the end of this slide, did you not hear the saying of the poet? Which means, I swear by Allah, every time I came visiting you, I found the ground folded for me. And every time I decided to turn away from you, I stumbled in the tail of my clothes. What is the author saying here? The intended meaning by these lines of poetry is that whoever turns to Allah will obtain his goals and desires by the will of Allah. To the extent that a person might even find as if the ground has been folded up for them, just for them, as if they're going exactly where they want to go, exactly what they desire, all because of what? They turn to Allah. And yet, whoever leaves out turning to Allah and instead turns to other than Allah will be in ruin and failure for sure. Hence, what's the conclusion from that? Put your trust in Allah and not the creation. Isn't that why the Prophet ﷺ said, if you ask, then the best one to ask is Allah. And if you seek help, then the best one to seek help from is Allah Ta'ala. This is a level that the high-ranking Muslims have attained by not asking others for their sustenance, not asking others for cures, not asking others for relief of hardships and difficulties. They put their trust in Allah. And they find the ultimate reward in the hereafter, but sometimes they might find the benefit and the merit of it in this life before the hereafter. May Allah facilitate that for us. That's the end of section 2. Move on now, inshallah. The new section, the author said, Fasl, section 3. The author is still advising his son and says, وَانظُرْ يَا بُنَيَّ إِلَى نَفْسِكَ عِنْدَ الْحُدُودِ فَتَلَمَّحْ كَيْفَ حِفْظُكَ لَهَا فَإِنَّهُ مَنْ رَاعَى رُوعِي وَمَنْ أَهْمَلَ تُرِكْ. He's going back to addressing his son directly. He says, my son, look at yourself regarding the boundaries. What does he mean by the boundaries here? That is the boundaries of the religion. They refer to what the religion ordered to be fulfilled or avoided. The religion sometimes orders us to do something or to stay away from something. So he's saying, my son, look at yourself regarding those boundaries. See how observant you are of them. Meaning, look into yourself and look at your application of the orders of the religion. Are you someone who performs the obligations and avoids the prohibitions? What's your situation? He moves on to say, the one who observes will be observed, and whoever neglects will be neglected. In other words, whoever preserves the religious boundaries will be preserved and protected by Allah. So he who observes the religious boundaries by ensuring they don't transgress them, they make sure they fulfill their obligations, and they make sure they stay away from sins. What will they get as a result of that? They will be observed by Allah. What that means is that their situation will be managed by Allah in a way that what Allah would protect them and preserve them. This is the meaning of the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam once said to him, Ya ghulam, inni u'allimuka kalimat, ihfazillah yahfaz, ihfazillah tajidhu tujahak. Which means, oh young one, let me teach you some beneficial words. Preserve the rules of Allah and He will preserve you. So he said, ihfazillah literally means preserve Allah. But what does that mean here? It means that preserve and maintain the fulfillment of the orders of Allah in times of ease, comfort, and safety. And as a result, yahfazka. As a result, Allah will protect you in times of difficulty, hardship, and danger, and especially at death. May Allah protect us at such a time. Hence, if a person is living comfortably and he keeps up with performing the orders of Allah and obeying Him during times of ease, then if life becomes difficult for him, Allah will protect him during that time of difficulty. And if the person fulfills the orders of Allah during times of safety, then Allah would protect him during times of fear. If the person fulfills the orders of Allah during the state of good health, then Allah would protect him during times of illness. If the person fulfills the orders of Allah during his lifetime, then Allah would protect him at death. Aren't there those who, when times get difficult, when life gets challenging, when some hardship befalls them, then they remember, I'll pray now. Now I will stay away from sins. Now I will make dua. Before that, they weren't doing that. When life was good, they did not turn to Allah and obey Him. When life was comfortable, their health was good, etc., they were living their lives, enjoying themselves, not fulfilling their obligations, committing sins. And then when they have an accident, lose a family member, lose their job, now suddenly they want to make dua. Now suddenly they say it's time to pray. In itself is not a bad thing, for example, to obey Allah. No one, and this is, by the way, what some ignorant people say is that, oh, you didn't used to obey Allah before, there's no point now. Well, a'yadhu billah. That's a dangerous statement to say. Yes, they should have been obeying Allah before as well, but even if they are now choosing to obey Allah at a belated time, it's still encouraged for them and something they should be doing. But what's the point being made here? That if you were obeying Allah during those other times, now when you truly need Him, you will more likely find that aid. More likely. Not to say Allah won't answer your dua whatsoever if you weren't good beforehand, but there's more of a chance. It's more likely that you remembered Allah Ta'ala when times were easy for you. And so when times are difficult, Allah would protect you. And so if during your lifetime you were an obedient slave, then on the verge of your death, it might be that Allah would protect you. For it was narrated about some of the scholars of the Salaf. And this is not a prophetic hadith, but they mentioned that the human will get thirsty when at the verge of death. Their mouth becomes dry, their lips become parched, and they feel that they want water. At such a time, the devil would appear to him. This person, on their deathbed, will appear, or the devil would appear to him, carrying a cup of water and say, Ukfur billah, asqik. Commit blasphemy, and I will quench your thirst. Wal-'iyadhu billah. If this person had been performing the orders of Allah during his lifetime, then Allah would protect him at such a moment. Such a time where the devil is exerting his very last effort to get this person to leave Islam just before he dies and potentially die as a kafir. He's not given up on you yet. The shaitan, if he can, on your deathbed, will try and get you to leave Islam. What will protect you at that time? You being observant of the orders of Allah during your lifetime. As for if during your lifetime you were disobeying Allah, committing sins, not performing your obligations, then you might give in to that devil's offer. And there have been reports of people on their deathbeds who have left Islam. Just before they died, after being Muslim all their lives, rejected Islam, committed kufr, and died. Died on kufr. Why? Because of the sins they committed beforehand. They weren't observant, and so now they were neglected. Allah did not protect them at such a time when you would say they most needed Allah. But they were not observant of the rules of the religion beforehand. They were neglectful of them. So now, what do they expect? Except to be neglected. May Allah Ta'ala protect us from that. And so Abu Shuja', who was a governor, not the scholar, lived for, actually the scholar as well, but he lived for around 160 years. And his mind was still active. His sight and hearing was still strong. His pronunciation good, and his walking energetic. At what age? 160. Usually someone who is that old would be weak and need someone to help them walk. Yet his body remained strong and sound. And he was asked about that. Someone said, how? Like, what was the cause of this? How was it that you were able to get to such an age and everything's working fine? He said, we protected our organs when we were younger. So Allah protected them for us when we got old. Through our lives when we were younger, we didn't disobey Allah with them. And so Allah protected them for us. SubhanAllah. It is also possible that Allah would extend this preservation to your children. Meaning Allah might preserve the children and children of their children through the uprightness of the slave. Was it not revealed in verse 82 of Surah Al-Kahf? وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. This means, and their father was pious. Who are they? Two boys. Young boys were mentioned in that story of Surah Al-Kahf. What was mentioned about them? That these two boys were protected through the uprightness and righteousness of their father. It's not something they did. Something that their father did was a reason for them to be protected. Muhammad Ibnul Munkadir, rahimahullah, said, verily Allah would protect the child and child of that child because of the pious man himself, meaning the father. And likewise, the village that he is in and the houses that surround it, kind of like the suburbs, the surrounding areas of a town, the houses. He said they would all remain protected and covered by Allah. Because of what this man? Why? Because of this man, he was a virtuous man, a righteous man, an upright individual. So when a person reflects on that and hears something like that, and they delude themselves into saying things like, I am doing what's best for my child and protection of my child and future of my child by working all day long. 5, 6 days a week, overtime and extra time, and barely see my child. I'm all doing this for them. All to preserve their future, all to give them money in the bank, all to give them a bigger house, all to give them what they believe a preserved state. And sometimes that money that they spend years earning, that child blows it away on something haram. Forgets their father after they die. Don't ever visit their grave. Is that the future that you were thinking of? Was that preservation for your child? Was that doing what was best for them? Is this the type of legacy you wanted your son or daughter to remember you for? Someone who used to work all the time, earning money and earning money. And that's what they remembered you for. And so how do you expect them to remember you after you die if all you taught them was to think about money? Whereas if you thought, I want to do what's best for my child, I want to protect my child, then as well as teaching them what is beneficial for them in the hereafter, by you observing the rules of the religion and remaining steadfast upon them, this might be a reason for Allah to protect them in the future. And there are scenarios of that are mentioned by the scholars. I chose not to mention some of them now, just for the sake of not digressing too much. But what we mentioned thus far is enough to show that if you are a parent that truly cares about your child, you will obey Allah. You will not miss prayers to go and work, or miss fasts to go and work, or go out there and disobey Allah and earn haram money, for example, thinking and deluding yourself into believing you're doing what's best for your children or for yourself. Far from it. May Allah protect us from such a state. The author continued and said, وَإِنِّي لَأَذْكُرُ لَكَ بَعْضَ أَحْوَالِي لَعَلَّكَ تَنْظُرُ إِلَى اجْتِهَادِي وَتَسْأَلُ الْمُوَفِّقَ لِي. He said, I'm truly mentioned to you some of my situations, things that happen with me, so that you may look at my diligence and ask the one who gives success for me. So what's happening here? Here, Ibnul Jawziyy, rahimahullah, is mentioning to his son how Allah protected him during his youth and did not make him need and rely on the people. Even though he grew up as an orphan, remember, he did not need to rely on people. This is because he directed himself towards seeking the religious knowledge. Through that, Allah protected him. Through that, Allah bestowed him with many things and protected him from many harms. And he said to his son, ask the one who gives success for me. Look at the humility of Ibn al-Jawzi. We know his rank, we know his level, we know his status, but he is asking his son to supplicate for him. Oh, my son, make dua for me. Even though we all know he had a much higher rank than his son, but he wasn't boasting, he wasn't showing off. He wasn't saying, look at me, I'll make dua for you if you want. He's saying to his son, oh, my son, make dua for me. This shows the great humility of Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah. He said, فَإِنَّ أَكْثَرَ الْإِنْعَامِ عَلَيَّ لَمْ يَكُنْ بِكَسْبِي وَإِنَّمَا هُوَ مِنْ تَدْبِيرِ اللَّطِيفِ بِي. He said, the multifarious bestowments upon me were not by my effort, they were by Al-Latif's management of me. So Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, mentions the blessings and endowments that were bestowed upon him now and talks about them to his son. You know, what life was like for him when he was younger and what Allah bestowed him with. And again, he's not doing that to show off. He's trying to teach and guide his son to have humility and reliance upon Allah. He said, all of these endowments, it's because Allah, who is Al-Latif, managed all of that for me and bestowed that upon me. What's meant by Al-Latif? Al-Latif is among the glorious names of Allah, amongst the 99 names of Allah. And it means the one who is benevolent to his slaves and endows them with blessings in concealed manners, in ways that they would not expect. And as we said, this is usually because of the obedience of the slave for Allah that they got that in return. Lastly then, for today, the author mentioned, فَإِنِّي أَذْكُرُ نَفْسِي وَلِيَ هِمَّةٌ عَالِيَةٌ وأنا في المكتب ابن 6 سنين وأنا قرين الصبيان الكبار قد رزقت عقلا وافرا في الصغر يزيد على عقل الشيوخ فما أذكر أني لعبت في طريق مع الصبيان قط ولا ضحكت ضحكا خارجا. He said, I remember myself having a high himma, determination, meaning a high determination in seeking to do good deeds, pursuing virtuous acts, and competing to perform actions of merit. Always wanted to do more. He said, I was in the maktab, that is the library or the type of school at that time, at the age of 6. Doing what there? He was among the books, learning from the scholars at such a young age. He said at the age of 6. This is similar to how many grand scholars were raised. From their youth, they were on the path of obedience to Allah, the Exalted. Such as Imam Malik who sought the religious knowledge from a young age. He was around 12 years old when he studied the religious knowledge, and he became qualified to give fatwas, religious judgments, when he was 21 years old. And the students of knowledge would seek him out from around the world, especially during the end of the caliphate of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, and after that. And they continued to come to him in great numbers during the caliphate of Al-Rashid until he passed away. So look here, when some parents nowadays say, it's a bit early for my son to be studying the Quran and attending sessions of knowledge and learning about Islam. And they let them concentrate on their studies. And what they mean by studies is maths and English and science and other academic subjects. Later on, they'll study and they've still got time to learn about their religion. Again, if you've been directing your child from the age of 5, 6, 7, 8 until they are 18, oh my son, oh my daughter, the religion is not important. Learn about geography, learn about maths, and learn about, prose, and learn about this and that. And not only learn, make sure you study. Make sure you prepare for your exams. Make sure you attain high grades. Make sure you pass. Make sure you get into this school or that college or this university from a young age. Then it's not shocking that this child of yours ends up a doctor, ends up an accountant, ends up a pharmacist, ends up a CEO of a company, has a business empire. Later on in life, they send you on holidays, buys you a villa, buys you a beach house. They become, or they excel at those subjects that you push them in from a young age. They've mastered them now. They've reached the pinnacle of those fields because you started them off young. But then where's the religion and all that? Don't expect that individual to be praying and fasting and watching where their money comes from, unless they are being protected by Allah. Very rare people. Majority will be, as you told them to be, care about the dunya. And then if you reflect on how the likes of Al-Bukhari and Muslim and Malik and Ahmad and others were, we talked a bit about the biography of Shafi'i in the past. How did they get to where they got to? They didn't start learning at 18 and 25 and 32. When they were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they were learning the religion. How? Their parents were pushing them from that age. So if you want what's good for your child and their hereafter, push them when they are young to learn about their religion, to know and be knowledgeable about Islam, about Allah, about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about the matters of the religion. This is what is good for them. This is what is beneficial for them. This is what will enable your child to remember you after you die. This will allow them to visit you in your grave after you die. Just recently, I think on the past, what day is it today? Monday. So in the past 2 days, I've seen 2 sets of very neglected, derelict graves, and grave areas for that matter. Meaning, I saw a grave, more than one, and it looked as if no one had been there for a while. Why? All the family's dead? Probably not. What are they doing then? Probably what their father or mother encouraged them to do while they were alive, which is to get on with their life. And so it should be then that if you want that family member of yours, your son, your daughter, your nephew, your niece, even to remember you, then do what is going to enable them to benefit you, which is to guide them to the religion from a young age, as Ibnul Jawziyy was, rahimahullah. He said, I was a classmate of older children, meaning other students of knowledge who were older than me, but was blessed with a great mind at an early age, exceeding that of the older people, that is, even of men. Allah provided him with great understanding and a strong mind and intellect from a young age. May Allah have mercy upon him. He said, I do not remember that I ever played in the street with the boys. Ever. As a kid. That's what kids do, don't they? Play in the street. He said, I don't remember I ever did that. And this is something the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us. He said, Ma ana min dadin walad dadu minni. In this hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I am not one to play. And playing is not something, and jesting, that happens from me. Yes, the Prophet ﷺ at times joked with the companions, but he wasn't just playing games, playing around and the like. That's not what he used to do. That's not what Ibn Jawziyy said he used to do. At an age where you might think it's natural for a child to do that, but not him. Nor did he say, no, he said, sorry, did I laugh loudly. Laugh loudly. Again, isn't that what kids do? But not him. He was special. He was different. Allah blessed him with that. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam once said in a hadith narrated by Ibn Majah about Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تكثر الضحك فإن كثرة الضحك تميت القلب. He said, do not laugh a lot. You might say, why? What's the harm in laughing? We're just having a joke and it's just everything's a laugh and we're just having a fun time. He said, فَإِنَّ كَثْرَةَ الضَّحِكِ تُمِيتُ الْقَلْبِ. He said, laughing a lot, literally it says, kills the heart or makes the heart die. And nobody wants a dead heart. They want an illuminated, live heart. So reduce the amount that a person laughs. And another narration of this hadith, he said, also laughing a lot removes the light from your face. So look, even these minute things, which are not sinful things, playing in the street, laughing, the author is directing his son to and saying, this is not what I was like. Look how I ended up in such a high and honorable state. This is what I want for you, but it starts from that young age. That's something we need to bear in mind. All of this goodness that we see later was initiated from this tender age, and that's how it ended up then for him. May Allah Ta'ala raise his rank, enable us to benefit from the good advice that he gave, and grant us all the good ending. Ameen. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And Allah be exalted, knows best. Barakallahu feekum. We'll end that, inshallah. Continue in the next session. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لنا وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لنا وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لنا وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. بارك الله فيكم. Keep us in your du'as. May Allah Ta'ala protect you all. Inshallah, we'll continue then next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.